Hello and welcome to week 2. This week we're going to be talking about the theater of ancient Greece. The play we'll be reading is Oedipus the King. Here you see an ancient Greek theater. We'll be talking about the structures of their performance spaces as well as how they did what they did. I'd like to talk about the origins of Greek theater. The Greek philosopher Aristotle said that the instinct of imitation is implanted in man from childhood. What he's saying is that humans are the only animals that learn by imitation. Birds can make nests by instinct. Humans, the way we learn about the world around us and how we do things is done through the imitation of other humans around us, and theater is an extension of that. There's a Greek word used called mimesis. Mimesis means imitation. It's the root word for things like pantomime and mime. Pantos is Greek for everything, so pantomimes are imitators of everything. The idea of acting is that we imitate life and create reality. There is evidence of this sort of imitation even before the Greeks. Going back to Paleolithic cave art, suggests that human beings have been engaging in this mimetic or imitative ritual performances for tens of thousands of years. We very likely think that they involve dance and music. If we see these cave paintings in France depicting horses and other animals in motion, we believe that these depict both hunting events that these Paleolithic artists engaged in, but that they also imitated these scenes as well. And we think they did this for a variety of reasons. First of all, it reenacts vital communal experiences such as hunting. These people were dependent upon the migration of animals and the success of the hunt. And so, in order to train themselves and to test out hunting techniques, they would have to practice. We also think that they may have been petitioning their gods for success in the hunt and to protect their warriors from harm. We do also think that they were transmitting their histories, passing them down. They were an oral culture. They did not write their stories down. And so to learn about the world around them, they needed ways to share their stories, their customs, their lore. They could also have served as an appeasement for animal spirits killed during the hunt. These people, we believe, felt that the world around them was connected, and so in order to thank the sacrifice of the animals, they would reenact the animals' brave struggles during the hunt. Performance is central to rituals. It transforms the space, it transforms the people involved in it, and it creates a bond of community among performers and spectators. It's no coincidence that religious ceremonies, particularly Catholic ceremonies, even Muslim prayer ceremonies, they infuse the space with spirit. And theater performances arose out of this sense of creating a sacred space in their cave, in which supernatural events can occur. Greek theater is the beginning of what we believe is performed theater for performance sake. It started with a type of performance called a dithyramb. A dithyramb is a hymn that praises Dionysus, the god of wine. It was performed by groups of 50 men or boys who danced in a circle while singing. Here we have a picture of Dionysus. Dionysus, of course, was the god of fertility, the god of wine and song. He is shown here in this statue eating grapes with one hand and pouring a libation of wine down upon the ground. The festivals of Dionysus were held during the spring when crops were planted and new stock was born. It was celebrated in Athens, in which each of the 10 tribes of Athens would send a group of men or boys to this festival. There were prizes given out to the groups, and the competition was known as the agon. The agon is our root word for agony or struggle. Generally, these stories were stories of struggle in appeasement to Dionysus. As theater evolves and matures, it becomes our root words for protagonist and antagonist. These are the characters that are locked in a struggle in a story to seek answers. In 534 BC, we have record of the actor Thespis. He was a leader of a chorus. He made a mask, and instead of the song being questions unanswered to the god, he impersonates the god. So instead of them singing about Dionysus, the chorus is now singing to Dionysus, and they can ask him questions. Questions about the things that they're ingesting, the wine, things like, "Hey Dionysus, what is this drink you have made?" And he tells them it is wine, and they ask him, "What will it do to us?" And he says, "You should drink and find out." And so they do, and they act out the stories along with him. Acting brings us the word Hippocrates, which is the answer. It is also the root word for our English word hypocrite, which is not necessarily a good thing. It means someone who is two-faced. Of course, actors pretend to be someone that they are not, and so they are putting on the faces of different characters, and that's where this word comes from. Drama is a Greek word. It comes from drom, meaning to do, an action or doing. The Greeks regarded drama as a species of poetry. Different from epic poetry and lyric poetry, drama is poetry that you do, actions that you portray. Epic poetry, of course, are the works of the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer. These were poems that were memorized by bards who would go from town to town and tell the stories. They would not enact the stories of the gods and the heroes of the Trojan War and of Odysseus's return from that war. They would tell the stories. Lyric poetry was more romantic poetry or poetry in pastoral nature, and it was also set to music. Drama was actually the actors creating the heroes and the gods. In the city Dionysia, this was the festival every spring that would be held in Athens in honor of Dionysus. It would take 5 days where the entire business of the city would shut down, and this countrywide festival would be held. 3 of those days would be devoted to tragedy. 1 day each would be devoted to comedies and dithyrambs. The tragic poets each got a day. They would present a trilogy. So there would be 3 plays organized around a single theme. And then they would also produce a satyr play, which was a more bawdy or satire play that parodied the trilogy. Satyr, of course, is where we get the word satire. Each of these dramatic poets was sponsored by a choregos, or a wealthy citizen who would provide the financial backing necessary to produce the plays. These things were huge undertakings. You would be talking about an 8-hour performance in which you would need large choruses, actors, technicians to create the special effects, authors to write the plays who also directed them. It would take months of work, and so you would need ways to pay these actors. These businessmen would see this as a community duty or civic duty, and so they would produce these plays. Prizes were awarded to best dramatic poets in each category, and later on you would have prizes for acting, as well as the rise of the Teniktoi, which was the first theater guild of technicians and actors that would be responsible for the pay that these artists would get. This acting union survived until Roman times. So, types of dramatic poetry. First of all, we have tragedies. Tragedies were serious contemplations of important philosophical or theological issues, such as man's place in the universe, what his relationship was with the gods, his responsibility to his community and family, the nature of heroism, the quest for self knowledge, and the perils of his hamartia, which was a Greek word for tragic flaw, which talked about the bad decisions that resulted from pride. That would be hubris or some flawed character. This content was drawn mostly from epic poetry such as the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. There were other myths, such as the myth of Oedipus, which was known to the audience, and you would have these heroes who were of high birth that would have a tragic downfall caused by themselves or their hamartia. There was also comedy. Old comedy was popular in the 5th century BC. It was satire written to criticize any contemporary political or social situations. So you can think of things like The Daily Show for ancient Greece. New comedy, made popular in the 4th century BC, were romantic dramas based on domestic situations in rural and urban settings. Think of them as precursors to modern situation or romantic comedies. They became the foundation of later Roman comedies as well. New comedy characterized by stock characters. You will see these throughout theater history. Stock characters are characters of a particular type that are easily recognizable by stereotypical behaviors such as a foolish father or a shrewish wife, star-crossed lovers who were usually stupid, a braggart soldier, a social parasite, a pimp or a prostitute with a heart of gold, a cunning slave. These things survive really into our comedies today. We'll talk about those as we get through theater history. Satyr plays were named for the half-man, half-goat characters that form the basis of the cast. These plays were usually quite bawdy and sexual in nature. They made fun of the plots and characters that were presented in the trilogy. Actors wore goat-like masks, and they had phalluses attached to their costumes to emphasize the sexual nature of the plays. Phalluses were long appendages that would simulate the actors' penises, and these plays were quite X-rated. The Greek theater was a construction that was built outside. This is an artist's representation of the Theater of Dionysus, which we saw a picture of at the beginning of this presentation. It's characterized by the theatron, which is the sitting area built into the side of a hill. It was an amphitheater. The theatron, of course, is where we get the word theater. It meant the seeing place, and this is where the audience would sit. It was wrapped around a performance area called an orchestra, where we get the modern word orchestra. They did not have instruments in this place, however. This is where the chorus would stand, and the chorus would be able to dance and move in formation in this large open space. They would enter and exit into the performance space in the sides on the parados. The parados allowed access to the orchestra, but also to a stage area called a skene. We call that the scene today. This was where the actors portraying the heroes or kings or the gods or the messengers would stand. Over time, this went from being just a wooden structure to being a full stone structure. In the 4th century, Spartan ruler Lycurgus built a permanent stone theater, and these became very, very elaborate. The Theater of Dionysus is located on the southern slope of the Acropolis in Athens. The Acropolis was a religious temple, and this was built into the side of it. Of course, it also served as a religious area as well. It was, of course, carved into the side of the hill. These theaters were very elaborately constructed. Some of them in Greece, you can stand in the middle of the orchestra and whisper and be heard in the back row. So the technological achievement by the Greeks was really a wonder. Greek performance conventions. Performance conventions, if you remember, is how they did things. Of course, they had three actors. The protagonist. The protagonist was the first actor, and he played the lead role, usually exclusively. So in plays like Oedipus, you would have the actor playing Oedipus and no one else. Then you would have an antagonist, and the antagonist's role was to play against the protagonist. And this actor would play secondary and supporting roles, such as Creon or Jocasta, although all three of those characters are on stage at once, so they would have to be separate actors. So you would have a third actor that would play one of those, and also any of the minor characters. Generally, the third actor was looked at as the apprentice, and they would be playing slaves or messengers. All of these actors, of course, would have to be able to change characters pretty quickly, and an easy way of doing that was by the use of masks. These masks would cover the actors' entire heads, and they would also wear costumes indicative of their social class, their gender, or their divinity. So it was very easy shorthand to tell who they were. The style of acting, because it was in such a large space, we're talking 17,000 people in the theater of Dionysus, these style of acting was most likely operatic and very stylized and over the top. Most of the text was set to music and would have been sung or chanted. Much of the large monologues that you'll witness in Greek plays would have been sung to music, particularly the chorus. The chorus consisted of 12 and then 15 young men for tragedy and 24 for comedy. They often sang and danced in unison. It's often believed that the chorus was also a training ground for military. Because the military had to move in strict formations, much of the training could have been done through the use of this dramatic poetry, as well as the stylized and unity movement that was used in the performance. The chorus is very important in Greek theater. First of all, they provide a commentary on the action. So they provide shorthand to you as the audience to what's going on, what you need to know to get into the action of the play. They serve as witnesses to the action. The main characters also talk to them and they respond back. They serve as stand-ins for the audience, representatives of us, to serve as a bridge between the world of the audience and the world of the play. Often it's tempting to skip large swaths of dialogue, and the chorus is a large amount of dialogue. However, they provide a lot of important information into the world of the play, and you should not skip them. So make sure you pay close attention to them as you're reading through Oedipus. Here we see the three acting levels, the way they would have performed the play. Number one, you see the roof of the skene. That is where the gods would address the heroes. Number two would be the stage where our heroes would be performing. Group three would be the orchestra, where the chorus would be. Notice on group two, where the actor is pointing out toward the audience, all performance was done out to the audience, not to each other. You can also see on this drawing the stagecraft that they would use to present the shows. They had the ikaklima, and the ikaklima was basically a wagon or a cart that could be rolled out onto stage. None of the violence in Greek plays was shown on stage. You would have a messenger or a servant that would come out and tell everyone the horrible things that happened as a result of these tragic endings. Oedipus, spoiler alert, blinds himself at the end of the play. And rather than showing him doing that on stage, a messenger would come out and say, Oedipus has done a horrible, horrible thing. Oedipus would be rolled out on this cart with bloody, pulpy eyes, and the audience would be duly horrified. They could also have periactoi. Periactoi were three-paneled posts that scenery could be painted on, and they could swivel these posts on their axis to show different backgrounds. Uh, Pinaques were slotted paintings. They were flats, basically almost like plywood boards that could be slid into the skene to create different backgrounds as well. And then they had the mechane, which would be the machine that could lift gods from the first level of the heavens down to the stage and up and back behind the stage as well. So they had quite sophisticated production values in their theater. Aristotle is an important figure to talk about in Greek theater. Aristotle is the reason why we know a lot about what the Greek authors and Greek theater did. He wrote a book called The Poetics, and in the Poetics he talks about the elements or the building blocks of theater. First of all, plot. What happens in the story? Basically the beginning to end. He talks about characters, the people who are doing the action, Oedipus, Jocasta, Creon, the people we need to follow in the story. He talked about thought, or the big idea or the theme behind the story. What discussions of humanity were being talked about when performance was happening. The dialogue, the actual poetry of what the character says. Music, most of this was set to music. Music was a shortcut into your emotion. The spectacle, the costumes, the scenery, the lighting, and the special effects. According to Aristotle, all Greek theater needed to have a tragic hero. That tragic hero needed to be of high birth. Tragedy didn't happen to slaves. Slaves were born into poverty, they were mistreated, and they died in poverty. Nobody expected them to be much different. The Greeks were interested in the high fall from someone who had ultimate power down to someone who was corrupted ultimately. That was what was interesting to them. That tragic downfall had to come from a tragic flaw inside of themselves, the himartia. And that they must realize that that downfall was caused by that flaw. Aristotle talked about the wheel of fortune, where you would be on top of that wheel at one point in your life, but it would always roll around and crush you as the wheel turned. Aristotle said there needed to be 3 unities to a story. Those unities were of time, that a story must be as close to real time as possible, no more than a few days, that there must be a unified place, that the play must take place in one location, and that there must be one plot. There weren't any side stories or any other things happening in the tragedy. We were focused solely on the struggle of Oedipus. Now we talk about some important dramatic poets. First up, we have Aeschylus. Aeschylus was one of our first dramatic poets after Thespis. He introduced the second actor, or the antagonist, and so now you had a dialogue between 2 characters. He is the author of the oldest play in existence that we have, The Persians, and the only trilogy, one plot, where you have 3 plays around one plot, the Orestia. 7 of his plays survive today. Next we have Sophocles. Sophocles introduced the third actor and the use of painted scenery. 7 of his plays survive. One of them we're reading, Oedipus the King. Sophocles' further trilogy around Oedipus is Antigone, which follows Oedipus's daughter, as well as Oedipus at Colonus. Euripides is our third tragedian. He wrote very intense, challenging female roles. Medea is his most famous play. Medea surrounds the wife of Jason, Jason of Jason and the Argonauts, who, after a long marriage, dumps Medea to the curb, and she gets revenge by slaughtering Jason's children. Medea's characters have great psychological depth. We have 19 of Euripides' plays. We have to have our comedian. Of course, there's Aristophanes. Aristophanes is the author of Old Comedy, wrote biting satire. 11 plays survive. His most famous play is Lysistrata, the story of the Peloponnesian War, in which the women of Athens decide to stop their husbands from fighting war by refusing them sex. Lysistrata will be performed by the Casper College Theater Department this spring. And of course, Menander, our surviving author of New Comedy, he wrote. We have one complete play, and large fragments of others of his plays survive. This week we'll be reading Oedipus the King. Oedipus the King was first performed in 427 BC. It was based on a story that the audience would have known before they walked in. The things that Oedipus talks about is the struggle between ignorance and knowledge. Are there things that are better left unknown? And what happens when we find out about secrets from our past? Blindness versus sight, the inevitable end of Oedipus, his tragic end of blinding himself, and ironically, through trying to see the truth. The battle of darkness versus light, fate versus free will, surrounds this play. Jocasta and Laertes, by trying to resist fate, actually set fate in motion. Later on, Oedipus, by trying to resist his fate, sets his fate in motion. The price of self-knowledge. What do we lose or gain by learning everything about our stories? Oedipus features dramatic irony, which is a literary technique used in Greek tragedy by which the full significance of a character's words or actions are clear to the audience or the reader, although unknown to the character. So by walking in knowing that Oedipus is the person who killed his father and has married his mother, we get to get a drop on Oedipus and see his tragic downfall before he does, and that creates tension. The play studies peripeteia, or reversal, which is an important element of Greek tragedy where the protagonist's fortunes take a turn for the worse. It's the part of that story or climax in which the protagonist suffers his downfall. We also have to have the anagnorisis, or the recognition that occurs when the protagonist sees the truth of his situation and recognizes the consequences of all he has said and done. In most Greek tragedies, according to Aristotle, the tragic hero can't die. He has to live with the results of his downfall, where everyone around him dies, but he survives to have to live to old age with the consequences of what he has done. The audience, by watching these stories, get a catharsis, the release or the purgation of pity and fear. It creates that experience in you. By witnessing this tragedy, you feel the emotions of Oedipus, of Jocasta, of Creon, and you release them in a way that doesn't hurt you, that psychologically is healthy. So you can see what would happen if you were to kill your father and marry your mother, but you don't have to actually do those things. We believe that's why we still watch movies and television today, why my 18-year-old daughter loves scary movies, so that she can see all these horrible ways people can die, but she doesn't have to experience it herself. Here we have a painting of Oedipus solving the riddle of the Sphinx. I hope that you enjoy the Oedipus the King this week. I look forward to your discussion online. The chat this week will be delayed. I will send out a notice as well. I'm going to be in California. So let's shoot for a chat in the chat room this weekend at 7 p.m. Western Time, and I'll be in there till 9 if you have any questions about the play, questions about the quiz, or how this class runs. Thank you, and I look forward to our talks.